Okay, so it's 11:05 now. A couple more people have joined. Can everybody hear my audio?
Yes.
How's my audio? Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is this is the grant programs webinar for the FY26 fiscal year. My name is Summer Callahan. I'm the grants manager here at COCA. We also have Samantha Sumler, who is our marketing and communications manager, and we also have Jensen, who is our new grants intern. So, hi, Jensen. I'm going to talk about grants, eligibility, how much you can request, what to expect from the panel, from the perspective of somebody who wants like the full picture. We do not have a lot of people here. There is another webinar later today that's for returning applicants that's focusing on the updates. So since there's not a lot of people here, feel free to jump in whenever you want. I will sort of pause for questions in each section. So if anyone would like to unmute themselves or type their question in the chat, or if you would like to wait until the end, there will be more of a Q&A session. Though everybody should be aware that I am recording this and questions will be captured as part of the recording and they will be public record. So with that, yes, everybody who registered will get a copy of the recording along with all the links and everything. Okay, so quick explanation of what we do. So the Council on Culture and Arts is the local arts agency for Tallahassee and Leon County. And the purpose of a local arts agency is to strengthen, support, and advocate for arts and culture at the local level. So we have a couple of ways of accomplishing that. So first, we have public arts, and this includes galleries at the airport, City Hall, sometimes the R.A. Gray building. We host Creative Tallahassee, which is the largest juried show in the city. We also have some public beautification programs like Asphalt Art, Greater Art for Greater Bond, and Mural Makeover. Then we have arts education. So we provide grants to arts teachers for classroom materials, and our arts education manager does like resources and lessons plans and workshops for professional development. And then we have events that celebrate student artwork like Winterfest and Chalk Walk. And third is marketing. So our marketing and communications manager, Samantha, provides consultations for artists and nonprofits, offering advice on effective marketing strategies. And we also publish newsletters featuring local events, job postings, and then other arts-related initiatives such as the Bicentennial. And the last is grants. And so in addition to these yearly grants that I'm going to talk about today, I also do funding consultations. So if you have questions or you're looking to get something funded, but you're not really sure how you would go about that, reach out to me and I can look into all of our resources. Okay, so before I get into what the grant programs are, I want to cover basic eligibility. And so this is going to apply to every single grant program that we offer. So to apply to anything, you should be either a 501c3 Florida nonprofit or a cultural organization associated with a state or municipality FEID. So that would be like the state of Florida, FSU, FAMU, or Tallahassee State College, formerly known as Tallahassee Community College. And if you are a state partner, you have to fall into one of these two categories. So either you are general educational, which means that you have programs that enhance Leon County through broader public access, benefit, and participation in public arts, in arts and cultural events. So the key point there is public access. So if you're like Florida State University and your programs are primarily for university enrolled students, that would not qualify for COCA funding. So if you're not general educational, you can be a destination, which is a permanent facility or site that's open at least 180 days a year with regular programming available to the public and a documented impact on tourism visitation. So at this time, we do not have grants to individual artists, but if you are an individual artist, like I mentioned, we do funding consultations. So reach out to me and I can find some grants that are more suited to what you specifically are looking to do. Now, if you're a nonprofit, at least 60% of your operating cash should come from earned income. So operating cash is like, I will get to that. That's a good question. Operating cash means day-to-day operations. So that's stuff like programs, overhead, and administration. It doesn't include capital campaigns, endowment funds, cash reserves, or contingency funds. Earned income can mean like admissions, contract services, corporate contributions, sponsorships, foundation grants, and competitive government grants. So it doesn't include government paid staff, government paid expenses, or government contracts, which I know seems really complicated. So I do have some good news that the application will automatically calculate that and tell you if you're above the 60% threshold. So basically the only thing you would need to be worried about is if you are spending a lot of money on things like endowment funds or like cash reserves, which if you're actually just spending money on your programs shouldn't impact you. Or if you're getting a lot of money from the government, but it's not competitive grants. So you don't have to apply for it every year. You just are automatically funded through some line item or something. Did that answer your question, Gordy? Okay, perfect. Okay, and like I said, the application will calculate this for you. Okay, so your organization needs to have an arts and or history programming as your organization's primary purpose, and that should be reflected in your mission statement. Your organization needs to have at least one fiscal year of programming, and by programming, that means holding public events and activities, not just fundraising. Then your organization needs to produce programs, activities, or events in Tallahassee or Leon County. And these programs can be in person or they can be hybrid, but they must be open and accessible to the public, and they must be regularly available throughout the year. So I really want to emphasize that. It has to be throughout the year because we are not allowed to fund like one and done events like Springtime Tallahassee. So you will need to provide statistics on attendance and participation that demonstrate your impact on the community. Your organization will need a board of directors, and that board should meet regularly and operate under a set of bylaws. Your organization needs a professional staff, and the staff doesn't have to be paid, they can be volunteer, but it means that somebody should be available during regular business hours if I need to call or email you. Your organization should be able to demonstrate community support. So that means subscriptions, membership, earned income, foundation grants, any other fundraising. And it also includes in-kind support, which is donations of goods and services or volunteer hours. And last, your organization must have an accessibility plan in place, which should include compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So does anybody have any questions about basic eligibility so far? Okay, and we can always go back to this for the record. So you have to meet all those criteria to apply for any grant. And then each of these programs has a few additional criteria to meet. So there's actually 3 grant opportunities for you this year, which are the cultural grant, the cultural tourism marketing grant, and the local community grant. Now, in the past, local community grant has been called the cultural grant parentheses community, which is very confusing for everybody. It's been called the city grant and round 2. And now we're calling it the local community grant, which should fix everything. So before I start talking about those grant programs, I want to talk about the tourist development tax. So the tourist development tax is a 5% tax based on mostly, but not exclusively, hotel stays. And COCA gets 20% of these collections from this tax, and we use it to fund our cultural grant and our cultural tourism marketing grant. So the collections from this tax are consistent, but they fluctuate. So since the pandemic, quote unquote, ended, TDT collections have been increasing. We gave away just under $2 million in FY25, and we're anticipating giving away over $2 million in FY26, which is the year that you're applying for. Now, according to Florida statute, if tax revenues are expended for an activity, service, venue, or event, then that activity, service, venue, or event must have the attraction of tourists as one of its main purposes. And you will know that attraction of tourists is one of the main purposes because the event will be actively marketed towards tourists. And a tourist is specifically defined as someone from outside Leon County who travels into Leon County. So does anybody have any questions about this tourist development tax? Okay, so something to be aware of in relation to the tourist development tax, there is a bill, HB 7033E1, that mentions the tourist development tax multiple times. Basically, instead of reserving the tourist development tax for events that attract tourists, like arts and cultural programs, this bill would use those funds for other purposes. I want to say this bill has not gone through, and so there are no changes to our grant programs at this time. but this is something that you need to be aware of and that you should consider contacting your representatives about, especially considering the arts funding situation at the state and federal level. This is still sort of recent, so Florida Cultural Alliance is working on scripts and coordinated action, so we should have more information for you on Monday. Florida legislative session goes through June 6th, and the ask is going to be to keep tourism local and to keep the tourism tax funding tourism and nothing else. So here is some contact information for your representatives. You will also receive this in the follow-up email. Does anybody have any questions about this part? Okay, and like I said, we can go back to anything you want. So with that in mind, the first grant funded by the Tourist Development Tax is the Cultural Grant. And so this grant funds expenses associated with year-round arts and cultural programs, and year-round means that your application needs to mention at least 2 different events. And then you'll have to meet at least one of the following goals. So 1, offer arts, history, or cultural programs with exemplary standards and objectives. 2 is provide educational opportunities in arts, culture, and/or history for young people or adults. And then 3 is serve a special or diverse population or need, fill a unique niche, or engage the community in the creative or artistic process. Now, because this grant is funded by the Tourist Development Tax, you also have to do all of the following. So you have to have as one of your main purposes the attraction of tourists. You must clearly identify how you will market your programs outside of Leon County. You must have a marketing plan that clearly indicates out-of-county marketing. And then you must track and report the number of out-of-county visitors to your grant-funded programs. You also can't apply to COCA and the Leon County Tourism Grant Program for the same project, program, or event. But if you're worried about that, or you're not sure how that applies to you, contact me. Oh, I got a question about, will COCA provide any information on this bill that we can use to help spread the word on social media? Yes, pay attention to our social media. I will be sending everybody emails about it, and I would also sign up for emails from the Florida Cultural Alliance because they're kind of spearheading it. But you will definitely be hearing from us about this. Okay, so yeah, no problem. Okay, so the next question is, how much can I request from the cultural grant? And the answer is that it depends on the type of organization that you are and your budget. So if you're a nonprofit, your maximum request is based off of your allowable operating income in your last completed fiscal year. And your allowable operating income is your programming expenses, plus your overhead expenses, plus your administrative expenses, plus your in-kind. I know I sort of mentioned this already, but if you're not really familiar with the term in-kind is a donation of goods and services. So, for example, if someone lets you use the space for free, they've made an in-kind donation equal to what it would have cost to rent that space for the time that you use it. If you have volunteers working as ushers or something like that, that's an in-kind donation equal to what you would have had to pay for that service. Now, an in-kind donation can really inflate your budget quickly, especially if you don't have a lot of cash, but you're relying a lot on volunteers. So there is a rule in the guidelines that your in-kind can't be more than 15% of your total budget. So if your in-kind is more than 15%, you're capped at 15%. So once you determine your allowable operating income, you can use this chart to determine your maximum cultural grant request. So for example, if your allowable operating income in the last completed fiscal year was less than $75,000, then you can request 50% of your operating income up to $30,000. And you can see how this sort of compares to last year. It's approximately the same, and the larger 2 groups, their maximum request went up a little bit. Now, if you're a state partner, your request depends on whether you are a general educational state partner or a destination state partner. So remember that a general educational is about arts and cultural programs that are publicly available, and then destination is about having a permanent facility. So if you're general educational, you can request up to $30,000 and your organization size is not relevant. If you're destination, how much you can request depends on what percent of your budget is earned income. So remember that earned income is basically all of your income except non-competitive money coming from the government. So if less than 60% of your day-to-day operations are paid for by like subscriptions or membership or something, then you can request $30,000 and your organization size is irrelevant. If 60% or more of your day-to-day is paid for by earned income, then you would calculate your request as if you were a nonprofit. And you would want to use the earned income of your specific program or department, not the budget of your entire organization. So that's how to determine how much you can request in the cultural grant. Obviously, that's very simple, extremely straightforward. I cannot imagine that anybody would even have questions about it, but I have a shortcut, which is just to let the application calculate it for you. So this is sort of a newer feature, so let me show you how it works. The application will ask you what kind of organization you are, and depending on your answers, you'll be given a different spreadsheet with some automatic calculations built in. So just a heads up that if you accidentally click general educational, then you realize you're actually a destination, you would have to redo the budget. Based on the type of organization you are, the operating revenue section will automatically calculate if at least 60% of your operating income budget is earned income. It will calculate whether you have too much in kind in your budget. It will determine what group you're in and your maximum cultural grant request. However, I've noticed that spreadsheets in Submittable, which is our grant platform, are sensitive. They're Excel-like, but they're not actually technically Excel, so I have some tips for you. Type each number in rather than copying and pasting. I know that's kind of a pain, but sometimes copying and pasting transfers hidden formatting that breaks the spreadsheet. And if you end up getting an error, the first thing you should do is start deleting and retyping information. Next tip, always keep a backup copy. Every kind of web application runs the risk of glitching, and if that happens, I have no ability to fix or recover it. Every year that I've worked here and the years before when I worked at the state arts agency, someone would tell me that their application didn't save and they would need to completely rewrite this or that part. Keep a backup copy. I would also recommend to double check your math. The submittable spreadsheet deals in whole numbers, so no decimal points and no commas. You should confirm that your in-kind is not too high before you start drafting your proposal budget. Does anybody have any questions about determining how much you can request in the cultural grant or how to use this spreadsheet? Okay, moving on. So once you figure out how much you can request, the next question is how can you use it? So this funds year-round programming, but like, what does that mean? Plan to lead on the automated feature. I put that together. I was very pleased by it. I was entranced by my own cleverness, I have to say. So the good news is that funding year-round programs means basically anything as long as the expense is directly related to the program or the promotion of that program. So if you're looking for ideas, you should check pages 15 and 16 of our guidelines for some examples on how to best use it. But honestly, it would be easier to tell you how you cannot use the grant money. So this is not a complete list, so please refer to the guidelines, which I have linked here. You cannot spend your cultural grant on general overhead unrelated to programming or promotion, such as a financial audit or a board retreat. You cannot spend your grant on bad debts or mortgage payments or private entertainment or religious programs or lobbying. You can't donate it, you can't put it in your cash reserves, you can't use it to attend a conference or seminar, and you certainly cannot regrant it. But I've never actually encountered any of those. Where I see people go astray with their grant funds, or where they want to go astray, I should say, is here. So you cannot spend your grant on capital expenditures, which is like any construction or permanent alterations to a physical space. You cannot spend your grant money on food or beverages, including alcohol, even if you're serving it at your programs. You cannot spend your grant funds on staff travel. You can cover travel for outside contractors. So if you're having an artist perform, you can use grant funds to pay for their plane or their hotel, but not on ongoing personnel. You cannot spend your grant funds on fundraising events. And this one is new, so I have this fun little explosion. You cannot spend your grant funds on insurance that isn't specifically related to the project. So this was a request from Visit Tallahassee last year, who controls the tourism money. So insurance, like event liability insurance, fine arts insurance, special events, that kind of thing, that's fine. But you can't spend grant funds on general liability, workers' compensation, or property insurance, assuming the property is an office space. If the property is inherently related to the programs, like it might be for Goodwood, we would have a different conversation. So does anybody have questions about this? If you find yourself struggling to put your budget together, help is available. We can do any part of this application together. Okie dokie, moving on. So next grant is the Cultural Tourism Marketing Grant. So if you're eligible for the cultural grant, you're also eligible to request this one. And if you want to just request the marketing grant and not the cultural grant, you're welcome to do so. But honestly, I don't know why you would want to. So this grant is a flat $4,000 regardless of organization size. But unlike the cultural grant, it is stricter in that it must go to marketing expenses. So you still have some leeway. You can use it for media placement or production or printing materials, developing your website. And you can also pay a marketing person. So as long as they are working on marketing specifically to tourists, not people who are in Tallahassee. If you need some ideas about how to spend your marketing funds most effectively, or if you need assistance putting together a marketing plan, which you are required to have to apply for either of these grants, contact our marketing and communications manager, which is Samantha somewhere, and I will put their email in the chat. So some tips for the cultural grant and cultural tourism marketing grant that are slightly new from last year. If you apply to either one of these, you're going to be prompted to answer the same questions in a couple of different ways. So you're going to be asked to click which out-of-county geographic markets you're targeting, and then it gives you like a drop-down menu, 100-mile radius, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Tampa, other. And if you say other, you're going to have to explain what that means. It will ask what marketing tactics you're going to employ. It'll ask for your marketing plan. And then when you're actually requesting money, you have to say what expense is related, like how the expense and the geographical market are related. So if you're going to spend $1,000 on billboards, you would have to say where that billboard is, something like that. This needs to match exactly. And by exactly, I mean to the letter. So every market that you clicked in the first section needs to appear in your marketing plan and in your budget. In fact, if you already have a marketing plan, you might want to have a second backup version that uses the same language as this application. I'm going to be looking for this when I review applications, and I can help you get them all sort of squared away and equal, but help me help you. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So the third grant that we offer is the local community grant, and this is a flat $10,000 maximum. Like the cultural grant, this grant funds expenses associated with year-round arts and cultural programs. Therefore, you have to meet one of the following goals: offer arts, history, or cultural programs with exemplary standards and objectives, or provide educational opportunities in the arts, culture, and/or history for young people or adults, or serve a special or diverse population or need, fill a unique niche, or engage the community in the creative or artistic process. However, this grant program is not funded by the tourist development tax. In fact, this grant doesn't have a dedicated pool of funding at all. A few years ago, it was funded by a one-time allotment from the City of Tallahassee's General Revenue Fund. And then we, COCA, were able to fund some applicants using an award from the NEA. We are doing FY25, but the federal government is not processing grants very efficiently at this moment. And we do have an application in for FY26, which is the cycle that you all would be applying for. But the federal situation is what it is. We're looking for alternate sources of funding, but there's a lot more competition for that now. So everyone should apply just in case, and it's very quick and easy to do so. But I also need everybody to understand that there is no confirmed funding for this program. However, because this grant has been paid for by the City of Tallahassee in the past, and because they might conceivably pay for it in the future, you also have to meet the following expectations. So you must align with the City of Tallahassee's priorities, which are economic development, impact on poverty, public safety, and quality of life. You don't necessarily have to make a case for all of them. You can just make a case for one. But we recently saw the Arts and Economic Prosperity 6 survey, which explicitly proved the connection between arts and economic development and quality of life. So I think everybody should be able to meet this expectation. You also must track and report the number of Tallahassee or Leon County residents who attend this program. And for this grant, priority funding would go to organizations that don't or can't apply for the cultural grant or cultural tourism marketing grant. There is also another caveat. You cannot apply to COCA and the Community Human Services Partnership or Community Redevelopment Agency for the same project, program, or event. But as before, if that's something that you're worried about, let me know and we'll look at it together. Does anybody have any questions about the local community grant? Okie dokie, moving on. And
Sorry, I
then
have a
the
question.
allowable
I
expenses for the local
apologize.
community grant are functionally identical to the cultural grant. Expenses do have to be in support of the program itself, not the organization, and you have the same rules about insurance. Question, are we able to apply for all three? Yes, as long as you meet the qualifications for all three. So you have to have the basic eligibility, and then you would have to be applying for the cultural grant and the cultural tourism marketing grant programs that support tourists. And then the local community grant is for programming that benefits residents. So you can apply for the same thing for both as long as, you know, it engages tourists and residents. Typically, people apply for two slightly different things because they have two slightly different focuses. But also, if you apply to all three, odds are that you're not going to get the local community grant because there is no dedicated source of funding, and it's going to go to people that only apply for the local community grant. But if you meet the eligibility requirements for all three, then you can apply to all three. So, absolute best case scenario, you could get money from the cultural grant, and how much that would be would depend on what type of organization you are and how big you are. Plus 4,000 from the cultural tourism marketing grant, plus 10,000 from the local community grant. And it can get confusing to get 3 checks from 3 different things for one source. So if you're going to apply for all 3, make sure that you remember what activities are associated with what grant and what expenses are associated with what grant. And you are going to have to report on them separately. So here's what you would need to apply. You would need your tax ID, your mission statement, you'd need last year's operating budget, your marketing plan, documentation of any partnerships, any supplemental materials that you want to show to the panelists. And if you're a state partner, you would need a letter of support from your parent institution, and that could come from an agency head or a division director or a department chair. So this is how to submit the application. So this information is on our grants website, and I'll drop that in the chat close to the end. And we can also follow these steps together at the end of this webinar if people would be interested in that. So the way you would apply is you would navigate to tallahasseearts.submittable.com, and then next to FY26 COCA grant programs, click submit. Submittable will prompt you to either create an account or log into your account. I know this is the how to apply for new applicants, but if you or anyone at your organization are looking for an old application, let me know and I can get you hooked up with it. And then Submittable will make you confirm your address for some reason. And then you should get to a page that looks like this. I zoomed out so you can actually see it, but you might need to scroll down depending on the size of your screen. This is the grant selection page. It should really only take a minute. It literally just gives you another explanation of what each grant is, how much you can request, and asks what grant you want, along with your name and contact information. And then you hit submit. So depending on what grants you said that you want, I have to provide you some additional forms. So everybody who applies is going to get a basic eligibility form, and that's going to ask you about like your board of directors and your professional staff and your community support and what your year-end programs are, and also your budget. People who want to request the cultural grant or the cultural tourism marketing grant are going to get the CG plus CTMG form. And then people who want to request the local community grant are going to get the LCG form. So if you want to request all 3, you're going to have 3 forms to fill out. And if you want to request just some of them, you might only have 2 forms. You must complete all relevant forms by June 18th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. I will provide you all forms within 24 hours. 24 hours is the absolute maximum. Usually it's much faster. I do check this nights and weekends, so you could get it at any time. Each time a form is assigned to you, you'll receive an email from Submittable, and each one will have an email that says what form it is, reminds you what forms you need to fill out. We'll have a link to access the form, and it will also have a link to our website that will walk you through finding the forms with screenshots. If you would like to look at all the forms assigned to you in one place instead of waiting for an email or relying on an email, sometimes that gets caught by a firewall or goes to spam or something, you can do that. This is what is on our website for the record. To look at all of them in one place, you would go to tallahasseearts.submittable.com. You would click view your submission in the top right of the screen. It will automatically prompt you to log in. And upon logging in, you should automatically be on a page called My Submissions. If for some reason you aren't, you would want to click submissions at the top of the screen next to the Submittable logo. And then you would want to look for your FY26 application and click the link in the submission column. And then you would want to click forms. and you get to a page that looks like this. You can see at the top, there's a section that says eligibility form. Just ignore that. That's a submittable thing. You can see your grant selection form here and all of the forms you've been assigned with a link to open each one. I know that this is really complicated. I have instructions on the website. It'll be in the email. It's in my email signature. I'll drop it in the chat. And if you find that you are struggling with any step or you don't know how to get to something, contact me. We can get it worked out immediately. If you click to open each form, it's going to look like this. You'll have the ability to invite collaborators to forms, but you have to invite a collaborator to each form. So you'd have to do it to basic eligibility and then CG plus CTMG and then LCG. There's a question on the basic eligibility form about America 250. So this is the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence being signed. The powers that be imagine this to be kind of like a community-wide, nationwide event similar to the bicentennial celebration that we just had here in Leon County. For the record, this is a bipartisan initiative that's been planned since 2016. That said, no one is required to participate. Participating or not participating will not impact your score. This is purely a fact-finding question. This is the process of getting to panel. So like I said, all forms are due June 18th at 11:59 p.m. Then I will review the applications for technical eligibility between June 19th and June 25th. So I might contact you just hypothetically to say like, well, you have too much in-kind in your budget, so your request is too high. Or you only talk about one event in your application, but you have to have year-round programming. Or your application isn't marketing to tourists and you're required to do that. Stuff like that. And if I find something like that, you can fix it. Question, can we still sign up to participate in America 250? So it's kind of like the bicentennial in that it's like you would hold, if you wanted to include that in your programs, you're welcome to do that. There's not, to my knowledge, any additional money like earmarked if you decide to do so. The question is so that we can help you like promote or see if you need any help or maybe find you extra resources. So yeah, there's not like any kind of official sign up. It's just whatever you want to do basically. Okay, so in previous years, you know, when I do my eligibility review, I would have to call you and then I would have to have you log into Submittable and make the edit. Submittable actually had an update recently that allows me to make edits to applications. So if there's something minor like a typo or there's like two numbers that need to match or something, I'll just fix it and you'll get an email that says what I changed and my explanation for why I changed it. If it's something more substantial, like your request is too high, like you need to cut it down somehow, I'll contact you and we can talk about it. And then I can make the change, or if you would like to go ahead and make the change, whatever you want to do is fine. But please stay on top of your phone and your email between June 19th and June 25th, because I only have a week to look at those applications and it's a really tight turnaround. Then, because the cultural grant and the cultural tourism marketing grant are paid for by the tourist development tax, they are subject to extra review. So applications to those two grant programs get forwarded to the Leon County Division of Tourism, who will verify that your programs meet the requirements of Florida statute. They will let us, COCA, know by July 11th if any of those applications are not eligible for tourist development tax funding and why. If you get flagged, we will let you know around July 12th, and you can either revise your application based on their comments or you can withdraw it. So if you revise your application, then Leon County would let us know whether those changes are acceptable on or by July 29th. And then applications to the cultural grant, cultural tourism marketing grant would get scored by a panel on September 2nd. Meanwhile, the local community grant is not paid for by the tourist development tax, so it doesn't have any of these extra steps. Local community applications will be scored by a panel on February 5th, 2026. Now, the reason that we're holding two panels and the reason that the local community grant panel is scheduled so much later than the other one is because historically funding for that grant program seems to settle in January. So in previous years, we scored applications to this program before we actually had the funding, and it puts applicants in a compromising position of like, should we go ahead with our programs? Like, are we funded or aren't we? But programs to the tourist development tax funded, applicants to the tourist development tax funded programs don't have that uncertainty. So by having these two different panels, we're trying to give everyone the same certainty, even though we're locked into a particular fiscal year by our contract with the city and the county. I would also like to add, All these dates are subject to change. If that happens, I will contact everyone personally to make sure that everyone is aware. So does anybody have any questions about this? Okie dokie. So COCA scores grants using a citizen review panel process, which is the same as the Division of Arts and Culture, which is the state arts agency, and the National Endowment for the Arts. So the panelists will be nonprofit experts, tourism professionals, community leaders, artists, educators, experts in various cultural disciplines. In accordance with the Sunshine Law, panels are a matter of public record, which means that the applicants and the other members of the public can attend. The panel will be held over Zoom. I really recommend attending the panel as an applicant. Part of the panelist responsibilities is to discuss the applications in a public setting and ask questions. So if you as an applicant attend the panel, you can answer their questions. But as applicants, you cannot question the panelists. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Because we'll be holding two different panels, there are two separate rubrics. So applications to the cultural grant and the cultural tourism marketing grant get scored on organizational capacity for up to 20 points, program evaluation for up to 20 points, and tourism impact for up to 10 points. Applications to the local community grant will be scored on organizational capacity and program evaluation for 20 points each, and on community impact for up to 10 points. And then your final score is the total points earned divided by the total points possible times 100. If you want to check the guidelines, we have a more extensive explanation of what goes into organizational capacity, what goes into program evaluation. So then your final score impacts the amount of funding that you can receive. So if your final score is 90 or above, you can receive your full request. And if your final score is between 80 and 89.99, you can receive 90% of your request at most. If your final score is between 70 and 79.99, you can receive 80% of your request at most. And all of that is dependent on funding availability, by the way. And if your final score is below 70, you are not eligible for funding. And last, we get the funding order, which depends on, as you probably guessed, the source of the funds. So with the cultural grant and the cultural tourism marketing grant, smaller organizations get funded first. So organizations with an operating budget less than $75,000 and general educational state entities get funded first from highest to lowest. And remember, the lowest score cuts off at 70. Then organizations with an operating income between 75,000 and 500,000, and so on and so forth, until funding runs out or everyone is funded. So our business manager determines the funding levels based on how much tourist development tax we anticipate having and based on the budgets of the people who usually apply. So I don't anticipate that we will run out. If we don't run out, if there are some TDT funds left over, they go into next year's pool, which actually is what happened last year. We had some funds left over and they went into the funding pool that you're applying for. With the local community grant, priority funding goes to organizations who don't receive a cultural grant or a cultural tourism marketing grant in FY26. So those will be funded highest to lowest score. And then organizations who are underserved, meaning that their operating budget is $150,000 or less, and BIPOC organizations get ranked highest to lowest. And then any organizations that don't meet those criteria are also ranked highest to lowest. With the local community grant, usually what happens is that there's only enough for the people in the top category, and they sometimes have to take a small cut to their award. But in the situation that we end up with more money, this is how it will be distributed. If you believe that your application was scored unfairly, you can ask for a reconsideration of scoring. You would just want to send a written and signed request to myself and Kathleen, who is our executive director, within 3 business days of the official announcement of the scores. The official announcement is an email that goes out shortly after the panel. We will pass that along to the board of directors, and we will reconvene the panel within 2 weeks of your request. That panel will also be a public meeting. You're invited to attend it. The panel will review your scores and determine whether the original score is legitimate or if it should be revised. And their conclusion will be both final and unappealable. Now, the FY26 grant year, the one that you're applying for, runs from October 1st, 2025 through September 30th, 2026. So cultural grant or cultural tourism marketing grantees can start spending their grant funds as soon as you receive them. Local community grant doesn't have a panel until February 2026, which is in the middle of this grant year. So people who apply to that category can either sort of spend their own money and wait to be reimbursed, or they can wait to spend grant funds once they're received. Either of those would be fine, but I do want to remind everybody that there's no dedicated pool of funding. So don't spend money that you need to be reimbursed for. I know this presentation is for new applicants, but if you are currently a grantee, as in you have a grant for FY25, you have to close that grant before a new one can start. So closing means that you complete all grant-related activities, you spend all your grant funds, you amend your grant if necessary, and then you submit a final report. So your final report has to be approved by me in order for your grant to be closed. Final reports also include a completed expenditure log that explains how you spent your grant funds. Not doing the expenditure log correctly is the biggest barrier to closing your final report. So my recommendation is to follow the expenditure log instructions to the letter. You may have noticed that your grant year starts October 1st, but last year's report isn't due until October 31st. So if you wait until that deadline, you're not going to get your grant funds until like mid-November 2025. So I would also suggest getting your final report in early if you can. Okay, so that's a lot of information. If you're confused or you're overwhelmed, you're not sure how to proceed, please reach out. I'm here to help. I want as many people as possible to apply. I can also offer draft reviews. So I do want to add some caveats. To review your draft, you have to have a draft and you have to have specific questions. I can't really help you write the draft. I can only provide feedback on what you've written. And also keep in mind that my review is subjective. I'm not a panelist, so my feedback isn't a guarantee of funding. I have our webpage with all the information here. I have the guidelines. I have a panelist nomination form, just in case you or anyone you know is interested in scoring applications. And I also have a direct link to the application. I also have links to the Arts and Economic Prosperity 6 study, which should be in everyone's back pockets, as well as the AEP6 calculator, which is a new tool created by the Americans for the Arts. It basically asks for the population of your community and then your operating expenses and your attendance. And then it uses that data to determine how many jobs are ultimately created and how much money enters household income and how much tax revenue is generated for local, state, and federal government. It's pretty cool. Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? I know I've been pausing this whole time. Yes, someone is asking questions about being a new 501c3. My email is summer@tallahasseearts.org. Let me drop some of these links in the chat as well. All right, it seems, unless anybody has any other questions, would people be interested in starting this process together and submitting this grant selection form? So I'd be happy to show my steps on the screen and everybody can follow along. Okay, one interested party. Anybody else? All right, in that case, I am going to turn off the recording.